say they have incurred enormous losses due to the bad state of farm-to-market roads.
The agricultural products we have here are highly perishable, and if we don't have good roads like we don't have to evacuate these products to where we can easily sell them, then the products go perishable, and that is not going to be of any help to us.
Aware of these challenges, some sons and daughters of the land came together to discuss on possible ways of getting out of the crisis and equally advance the development of the land.
The crisis, a lot of youths were out of the community. Thanks to Nyakuda, through Ngandejok, that brings sons and daughters of Nyasoso here back every year, made it possible.
Where the people have realized that coming together, building Nyasoso together is what is most primordial, bringing their own contribution.
Celebrated under the theme Reconciliation and Peace to rebuild Nyasoso, inhabitants are hoping that the festival will go a long way in bringing back the much needed peace, harmony and development they have been expecting.
And now onto our major league story. We take you to Senegal. Bassirou Diomaye Faye has been sworn in as Senegal's youngest president today, pledging systematic change, greater sovereignty and calm after years of deadly turmoil. The 44-year-old, who has never held an elected office, swept to a first-round victory on a promise of radical reform. Just to let you know that the inauguration ceremony took place at Jamnajo, some 30 kilometers away from Senegal or from Dakar. Let's now have more with Cédric Chakousio.
Le peuple sénégalais a voté dans le calme et la sérénité.
It is in the presence of numerous heads of state and government that the inauguration ceremony of the new president of the republic was held. Bassirou Diomaye Faye, a left-wing Pan-Africanist, has been sworn in as Senegal's youngest president, pledging systemic change, greater sovereignty and calm after years of deadly turmoil. The 44-year-old, who has never held an elected office, swept to a first-round victory on a promise of radical reform just 10 days after being released from prison. The Constitutional Council, led by Mamadou Badio Camara, received the oath of office from Bassirou Diomaye Faye, elected on March 24th as fifth president of the Republic for a 5-year mandate.
Monsieur le Président de la République, vous êtes désormais le garant de la démocratie sénégalaise, du respect des institutions, des droits et libertés, gage de la stabilité de l'État et de l'unité du peuple sénégalais dans sa diversité.
The first opponent to win a presidential election in the first round promised to be the guardian of the Constitution.
Devant Dieu et devant la nation sénégalaise,
I swear before God and the people of Senegal to faithfully execute the office of President of the Republic of Senegal, to keep the provisions of the Constitution and laws and to ensure their observance, to devote all my strength to defending constitutional institutions, to defend Senegal's territorial integrity and its independence, and I swear to spare no effort to realize the African unity.
In his first speech, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, president of Senegal, vowed to defend the integrity of the territory and national independence and to spare no effort to achieve African unity.
Je suis conscient que les résultats sortis des urnes.
I am aware that the results of the ballot box express a profound desire for systemic change. Under my leadership, Senegal will be a country of hope, a peaceful country with an independent judiciary and a strengthened democracy.
Afrique en progrès.
The former tax inspector becomes Senegal's fifth president since independence from France in 1960 and the first to admit to a polygamous marriage.
Président de la République du Sénégal.
And we will be talking more on that in the second part of the news. That does it for the first part. Talking Points comes up next. Welcome back, viewers. Tonight we will be talking about the president of Senegal, who was sworn in today at the age of 44. Bassirou Diomaye Faye is the president of Senegal. And our guest tonight is Dr. Christopher Fomunyo. He is the West and Central African Regional Director of the National Democratic Institute, the NDI. Doctor, thank you so much for accepting again to talk to Equinoxe Television.
And it's a pleasure to be with you and to share my views on this happy story coming out of Dakar, Senegal.
And now, Dr. Christopher Fomunyo, Bassirou Diomaye Faye has been sworn in as the 5th president of Senegal. Sure, Cameroon and other African countries have a lot to learn from that. What do you think?
This is a historic moment for Senegal and a moment of pride for the people of Senegal in having yet another peaceful transition of power, and this time to a 44-year-old young man. Just 6 months or a year ago, this looked improbable, but it's happened, and it's happened peacefully through meaningful, transparent elections, and it sends a strong message about the vitality and the resilience of Senegalese democracy, and also a strong message to youth across the African continent that they have to get engaged in the political process if they aspire to lead their countries, and that the time is ripe for them to do so.
Sorry, we are having some difficulties having Dr. Christopher Fomunyo there. Hope this time around the sound or the network is going to be better. Now, a 44-year-old Bassirou Diomaye Faye has been sworn in already as the 5th president of Senegal. Can you tell us what is your analysis of this transition described as a total breakaway from the former system?
Well, it's a very strong message of hope, and that determination pays off. As we all know, Africa is the youngest continent on the planet. We have the youth board in all of our African countries, the population that's between 18 years and 35 or 40 is the largest segment of the population. And they are also the most connected to today's technology. And what is happening in Senegal is proof that when young people are determined to engage and participate in the political process, they would always have the outcome that they desire. And so it's a message of hope and inspiration. And I hope that really young youth, African youth, can look at this and they can realize that they don't have to despair, they don't have to feel discouraged, they have to keep working at it, asking for their voices to be heard, and organizing to form that critical mass, which would make sure that they get to choose the leaders they want and deserve.
And now the president-elect, or the president of Senegal, is the youngest president-elect, or he has already been sworn in Africa. So far, he was elected democratically. That is the truth. What is the message that Senegalese, their institutions might be sending to other African countries, Cameroon inclusive, Doctor?
That are registered, that are represented in local councils, in parliaments, cannot hold meetings, cannot even hold press conferences, when political parties are being threatened for even just trying to form coalitions, which is a normal practice in every democracy, when civil society cannot even hold meetings or demonstrate peacefully to express their grievances, when journalists are being trailed and censored. You know, so I can understand that context, where people even feel that the courts are not independent, and where courts in the past have looked at elections and have said, well, we think this didn't go well, but our hands are tied. I can see why people would look at that context and feel that that context does not lend itself for peaceful, meaningful change. But I also want to remind them that history is full of change, even for regimes that look so autocratic and so dictatorial in the past. You know, today we celebrate a very democratic and free South Africa, but just a few decades ago, the apartheid regime in South Africa looked so strong. Today we talk about Russia, but let's not forget that before that, we had the Soviet Union, which was a huge empire that stretched over 8 different time zones. And it looked so strong, but then it collapsed. So when change is bound to happen and people mobilize and organize themselves accordingly, they can have the meaningful change that they so desire. So I don't want the young people of Cameroon to despair. On the contrary, they should look at what is happening in Senegal and come to the conclusion that there's multiple ways, there's many ways to skin the cat, and they have to continue organizing themselves, raising the level of citizen awareness, conducting civic education, voter education, and organizing themselves to get that critical mass to have consensus about the kind of change that's required in our country and how to make it happen.
Bassirou Faye and Ousmane Sonko have collaborated enormously for the change we now witness in Senegal. Many people never believed it would lead to where they are today, considering all the persecutions they went through. Can those two be an inspiration for youths in other African countries? We sit tight presidents to believe all is not lost. Everything is still possible to bring change, the kind of change they desire, Doctor.
That's really my hope. And also a reminder to all of us that everything is got an end. And it's a time for everything, not to sound biblical, but it's also a time for everything. And the efforts that have been put in by Sonko and by Bassirou Diomaye Faye have borne fruit today. A year ago, it didn't look like it would happen. And so people should realize that if you're tenacious, if you believe firmly, and you have a vision for your country and you work towards it, you ultimately would achieve it. And my hope also is that those two leaders would learn to work, to continue to work together, even as Bassirou, who was the number 2 in the party, now has become the head of state. There's still a lot of room for Sonko to continue to lead the party and maybe to regain his seat in parliament and eventually work within other branches of government, especially the legislative branch of government, and make room so that the two of them can really galvanize and foster this collaboration in a way that could be constructive and positive for Senegal and its future.
Maybe I ask the question in other words, Doctor. Personally, how do you read the collaboration between these two men? Power corrupts, but we say absolute power corrupts absolutely. Do you see them working together all through their mandates for the good of Senegalese?
Well, I'm optimistic in that regard because the two of them are quite reasonable. The two of them have worked together up until this point, and in an interesting dynamics, what has happened now may also fortify the need to separate the leadership of the political party from the leadership of the state, something which many countries ought to replicate. And so we could end up in a situation where Faye, as duly elected president of the country, is not the president of the same political party and allows Sonko to continue to lead the party and to manage the supporters that they have across the country. The two of them also must be very cognizant of the fact that the Senegalese people really went into this election as a referendum on Macky Sall and his government. And so everyone was determined to have a break with Macky Sall's political party. It also does not mean that they're going to give Faye and Sonko a blank check, that people have become so awakened about their rights and responsibilities that they're going to start holding President Bassirou Faye accountable from day one. And so he and Sonko cannot afford to make any mistakes because then they would play right into the hands of the opposition or people who doubted their capability or their ability to govern the country. So my sense is that that collaboration would last for a long time. And if it does, Senegal and its democracy and the young people of Senegal would have an opportunity to demonstrate to all of Africa and to the rest of the world that they have what it takes to lead a country, a powerful country as Senegal, and that would be a source of inspiration and a source of pride for all of us Africans across the continent.
And now, Doctor, from what you just said, it can be deduced that it is not good for to have a head of state who is at the same time the leader of the ruling party, as it is the case in Cameroon, where the President Probia is also the national president of the CPDM. There should be separation. Is that what you're talking about?
There's an oddity in every country when the leader of the country, who is supposed to represent all of the citizens in their entirety, is at the same time the leader of one of the factions, which happens to be one of the political parties, one amongst many of the other political parties. And so the right thing to do is to have that separation so that the party can compete on an equal basis with every other political party, and the head of state can actually run the affairs of state as the representative of all of the citizens of the country. In fact, in a nutshell, I would say this is but one of so many oddities that we find in our country, and that hopefully the next generation of leaders will be able to fix, to be able to bring a country such as Cameroon to the level where Senegal and several other African democracies are at this point in time.
And now to end this interview, Dr. Christopher Fomunyo, I want you to speak to Cameroonians who are discouraged, especially youth. They are hopeless, pessimistic because of the prevailing situation in the country. Many of them do not care about registering on electoral lists, getting a voter's card and voting because they think it will not make any difference. Their voices won't be heard and their votes might or will be read. Can you speak to them?
Understand the reluctance to engage, because many of them have invested their time and energy and efforts in mobilizing other citizens to advocate for democratic governance and have not seen the dividends of their efforts. And so part of that is understandable. But at the same time, they have to look at a case like Senegal and realize that effort does pay, and that you cannot afford to despair, because then you're really giving away your future to people who have no democracy in them. So my message will be a message of encouragement, a message of hope, a message of determination, and better coordination. I realize that the beginning of this year has been extremely difficult for Cameroonians across the board. You know, some of them went to Cote d'Ivoire to witness the African Nations Cup, and they were astonished by the level of development that Cote d'Ivoire has attained in the past 2 or 3 decades. Now, I met with some of them in Senegal who went to observe the elections in Senegal, and they were astonished, completely blown away by how open political space is in Senegal, by the fact that Senegal could go through an election, and by 12 p.m. the same night of the elections, results were already being known and being announced without any journalist being harassed, without any radio station or television station being shut down. And by early morning, on Monday morning, candidates were already calling the winning candidate to congratulate him, and even the head of state called to congratulate even before the election management body announced the official results. And so my fellow compatriots who were in Senegal saw that and were shocked. So I can understand how people feel in Cameroon right now when they see the progress that is being made by other African countries, both in terms of economic development and political development. My message to them is that they cannot afford to despair. This is the time to work harder than ever before to make sure that we can come out of the current situation as a more democratic and a more open country, in order to be able to galvanize ourselves and take ample advantage of all the opportunities that could present themselves, just given what we have in terms of human capital and natural resources, which unfortunately have not been put to the use of the greater good, of the public good all these years. So my message is a message of hope and inspiration and determination. Let no one despair, because the better days are not now, the better days are ahead of us, and to be able to accomplish them and achieve them, we have to continue to work in a very focused manner.
Thank you so much, sir, for accepting to be our guest on Talking Point tonight on Equinoxe Television. We really appreciate and hope to have you again some other time. Viewers, thank you so much for being with us.